Okay, good evening to all of our viewers. Yeah, we're live now here at Grandison Nursing and Therapy, and we already have like 25 viewers here. Okay, so let's just allow everyone to join and sit in with our immigration Q&A for today. Okay. Okay, thank you for watching Grace Sean. Yan. And thank you for watching Lian Zagala. Good evening too. Yeah. I guess there are a lot of nurses and PTs watching right now. So many questions about the recent EB2 and EB3 visa landscape. Yeah, so let's just give them a few minutes to warm up and join with our immigration Q&A. So once again, let me introduce myself first. So this is Jody, your Grandison Espresso Lounge host. So this is your virtual coffee table, a place where we catch up with our nurses, PTs, OTs, and of course our partners. And for tonight, we have a very special topic. Well, not special, but a very important discussion that we'll be doing tonight. And we have special guests as well who will be joining us to answer some of your questions about the recent EB2 and EB3 visa bulletin update. Okay, so yeah, thank you. Hello, Makavinta and Colleen as well for watching. Yeah, so I guess without further ado, let me call on one by one our guests for tonight, starting from Miss Joycey. Hello, Miss Joycey. Yeah, your mic is on mute, Miss Joycey. Can you? Yeah.
I think we're okay now. So, good evening,
Yeah.
everyone. And it's really a pleasure to be seeing most of our viewers in here. So, I hope that this becomes an educational exchange of communication between Grandison and you, and that some of the answers pertaining to retrogression be responded to as well. So, welcome to this session.
Yes, thank you so much for that introduction, Miss Joycey. And of course, from Grandison as well, let's all welcome Miss Maricris Dilar. Hi, Miss Maricris.
Hi, good evening to all. So, thank you for joining us tonight in this discussion. So, hopefully, we were able to answer all your questions.
Yes, indeed, Miss Maricris. And of course, also live from United States, we also have Cadence Moore. Hi, Cadence.
Good morning. How are you today?
Yeah, feeling great. How about you? How are you?
I am doing well. Excited to talk with all of you today.
Yeah, exactly. Me too. It's been a while since the last time we did a live session about the immigration update, specifically the visa bulletin. So I'm really excited to discuss it today, right? And of
Definitely.
course, later on, we will also be joined by Avi Lang, Grandison CEO. Yeah, and of course, hello to our 67 viewers right now from Facebook. Thank you so much for joining tonight. So I guess without further ado, I will be starting the Q&A first. But to all of our viewers right now, if you have any questions about the recent EB2 and EB3 visa bulletin updates, feel free to drop in your questions. We will do our best. We will try our best to answer all of your questions, especially that we have here someone from the recruitment team, Grandison deployment team, and of course, Cadence Moore. By the way, Cadence Moore, yeah. Can you give us a brief introduction about you and the company as well?
Mhm. My name is Cadence Moore. I am a partner at Corporate Immigration Partners. I work heavily in the healthcare space, specifically with nurses, PTs, occupational therapists, lots of different types of healthcare work. And I'm just very excited to be here and chat with all of you about the Visa Bulletin. We saw some forward movement, so that's some good news.
Yeah. And I guess before I start with the questions about the Visa Bulletin Cadence, can you give us a quick recap on what exactly is EB2 and EB3 visa and who is it for?
Mhm. So the EB2 and the EB3 visas are classifications. They're particular
Mm-hmm.
classifications based upon immigrant visa numbers that are available. So an EB3 visa is available for registered nurses, and that is because EB3 roles are ones that require a bachelor's degree or less to perform. An EB2 visa is available for PTs, and that is because it requires roles that require a bachelor's degree and 5 years of experience or a master's degree and higher. So really, it just has to do with your different classification and the immigrant visa numbers that the U.S. government has assigned.
Yeah, thank you for that, Cadence. Right, and since you mentioned about the credentials, about the master's degree, for example, so specifically for nurses, they are mostly qualified for the EB3 category. Is that correct?
That is
Yep,
correct, and
and I think
that's just
yeah.
because in the U.S., generally an associate's degree is what's required for a registered nurse, and it's based upon the role requirement. So since an associate's degree is what's required, the case falls within EB3.
Okay, thank you for that, Cadence. And I think also want to add to that for the PTs and OTs who are watching right now. For PTs, I guess they are also qualified for EB2 and EB3 because some of the Filipino PTs, when they enter the United States, they already have DPT, right? And for OT, it will be the EB2 visa category that they fall onto.
Yep, as long as the role, and so it's not necessarily the individual, but as long as the role requires a master's degree or higher or a bachelor's degree and 5 years of experience, then yes, it will qualify for EB2.
Okay, so let me share with everyone just a quick view of the recent Visa Bulletin update by October 2024. Yeah, so I guess before I'm being flooded by questions right now already from Facebook. But let me ask Cadence first. So when you see the Visa Bulletin update, what was your initial reaction, Cadence?
We were very glad to see some forward movement. I mean, there's about 2 years of forward movement that happened from what was listed in September of 2024. So that's some very good news. We generally see forward movement in October, and that is because the US government's fiscal year begins on October 1st. So that's when the new immigrant visa numbers are available. So this all makes sense as far as the new immigrant visa numbers are available. And so therefore, we would expect to see some forward movement. I would have liked to have seen some additional forward movement. I was hopeful for a little bit further. But, at the end of the day, any forward movement is good news.
Yeah, exactly. And speaking of the progression or the movement from the EB3 and the EB2 visa category, the EB3 visa category Cadence, what do you think is or how relevant is it for the nurses and PTs? And for example, if I'm a nurse or if I'm a PT under the EB3 visa category, what's in it for me if my priority date is within November 15, 2022?
So if your priority date is current in October's Visa Bulletin, it means that you will be able to reach the last stage of the green card process, which is the interview at the U.S. consulate. So it will depend on the specific stage of your case. However, if you've received the documentarily qualified letter from the National Visa Center stating that your case is qualified to go to the interview stage, what that means is starting in October, you will be eligible to actually go to that interview stage. It really means that you'll be able to move to that final stage of the process and then ultimately receive that green card.
Yes, and I guess that sounds like a good news to those whose priority date is November 2022, November 15, 2022, just to be exact and to clarify that because some of those who are watching right now may have their priority dates that are beyond November 15 already. Right? And actually, before I move on to the next question about the progression, there's just a question here from Facebook from Anne. Hi, Anne. Thank you for watching. About the credentials that we mentioned earlier. So, how about for nurses who has master's degree and more than 5 years of experience? Are they qualified for EB2 aside from the EB3?
So remember, it's not what you have; it's what the role requires. So
Mm-hmm.
if you are being sponsored for a role that requires an associate's degree as a registered nurse, then that role would only qualify for EB3. I will tell you that registered nurse roles generally don't require a master's degree in the United States. That's outside of the industry norm. So I would not expect that you would qualify for EB2 based upon any role that most organizations are offering. But yes, certainly EB3 is an option.
Okay, thank you for the cadence. And I guess the next question here, specifically I would like to ask Joycey from the recruitment team, because there's someone here. So I am a recent nursing graduate and a local recent local board passer as well. So am I eligible for EB3 visa category as well? Or does Grandison accept fresh grads? Maybe that's what she is asking for actually.
Terms of nurses being eligible for the EB3 category, definitely, because always in recruitment, we have been emphasizing the importance of starting your application now. Because, of course, as we always say, the longer you put off applying your visa, the greater the delay in terms of you living your American dream. So, of course, for those without any experiences yet, it's best to really gear up for your application by making sure that you take any further studies or any further education, take up most of the experience. But of course, first off in the process, if you're a licensed nurse here in the Philippines and you haven't taken your NCLEX exam, then you are strongly recommended to jumpstart your application by preparing for it and passing it, and later on, passing your English exam. Because as a matter of fact, Grandison has partners who will also be able to help you out. And of course, we can discuss further the sponsorship care of the recruitment team. Now, if you're a physical therapist, you have to equally gear yourself early, taking the review, passing the NPTE and the TOEFL exam. And if there's one keyword that I have here is that preparation is always the key, because retrogression is not permanent. So it can move from time to time and be lifted. So something that we can't exactly predict, but definitely, again, you have to prepare. So what matters, as we always say, is the queue in line. And once you're there, invited for the embassy interview and then called in for deployment, then by then you're going to be more than competitive and ready to become a USRN or PT.
Yeah, exactly. No, so I guess that answers the questions for those nurses who doesn't have NCLEX yet, or for PTs who doesn't have NPTA yet, and asking if they are eligible for the EB3 visa category. um, it's really important that you take the exam first, right? Because that's an important piece for your employer to move forward with the petition. Is that right, Kaden? So they basically need the NCLEX or the licensure, the NPTE for PTs, for them to be eligible for the EB3 visa application.
Exactly. So make sure that you have completed all the credentials that you are supposed to complete, because like Josie was talking about, yes, there is still some retrogression, but at the end of the day, the dates are going to continue to move forward. And if we are able to have you have all of your qualifications, then we can move forward with the first stage of the process. And remember, that first stage, when that I-140 petition is filed, that date of filing is when your priority date is assigned. So that is your priority date, is the first date of filing. So the sooner we can get that assigned, the faster you are going to be in that line. So certainly if you are interested in pursuing opportunities in the US, just make sure you are moving forward with all of those credentials so that Grandison can move forward with your case as soon as possible.
Yeah, exactly. Actually, there's an analogy that Sir Irving mentioned the other day. I watched his live, right? Sir Irving, I'll borrow your example, no? So imagine pila siya sa bangko, no? um, Imagine that you're in a bank and there's a line, right? There's a long line in front of you. Of course, for you to be able to get to the front, to the front desk, for example, or to the clerk, you need to make sure that you get your number, get in queue, right? So that when the time comes, when your number comes, or when the movement happens, right, you're already there. You've already made progress. You already have number, right? So if you don't take your NCLEX, if you don't take your NPTE, if you don't jumpstart your review or the processing, right, then it will take really long. No, so stop procrastinating and really, really start the review and processing your NCLEX and NPTE. Yeah, and going back to the recent updates on the visa bulletin, Cadence. So, how does the progression of the EB3 visa category impacts the processing time?
It means that if you are someone who has a priority date that is earlier than the one listed, you're going to be able to move to that final stage of the process. It also
Mhm.
means that we would expect to continue to see some forward movement. The way that the US government has historically operated in regards to the Visa Bulletin is that we see forward movement in the fall months and in the early winter. And that's because we're at the beginning of the government's fiscal year when the new immigrant visa numbers are available. We historically then see some slowdown and further retrogression in kind of summer, possibly late spring. So if we're going based upon what the Department of State has done in the past, I would expect to see some forward movement over the next couple of months, particularly, that will allow more cases to move forward. Now, keep in mind, often the Department of State will give us a little bit of guidance about what it expects to occur in the coming months. It did not do so in the October Visa Bulletin, which likely means that it's still deciding exactly how much forward movement to do. But I would expect to see some further forward movement.
Okay, so I guess what Cadence mentioned exactly answers some of the questions here about asking about the predictions for the November 2024 Visa Bulletin as well. And we also have one question here from one of our Grandison nurses, Cadence. So, as an immigration attorney and based on the trend of the current priority date, so do you think that there is a possibility that next year might turn current?
I would love that. I think we would all love that.
We all love that.
Yeah. So we saw a ton of, cases went current back in 2020, 21, and 22. And that was primarily due to the fact that we had COVID going on. And because COVID was going on, many of the family-based immigrant visa numbers, so marriage-based green cards, things like that, were not being used up because the consulates were not scheduling those appointments for interviews just because they were shut down due to COVID. So we got a huge backlog of visa numbers that were available. And remember, when the family numbers aren't used, those roll into the employment-based numbers. So that's why we saw everything become current in those years. At this point in time, the consulates are generally operating pretty routinely. We're not seeing a lot of shutdowns or anything of that sort. I don't think we're going to go current, unfortunately. Again, I would have loved that if that occurred, but I do think we will continue to see this type of forward movement.
Yeah, thank you for that, Cadence. And I guess before I answer one of our nurses' question as well about his dependents, so let me just say for Naze, he said he wants to apply with Grandison, Miss Joyce. Yeah. I guess Naze, you can directly message us on Facebook so that one of our recruiters can answer your questions about what documents you need to submit to Grandison in order to move forward with your application. And yeah, going back to the questions about the visa bulletin and about immigration, Cadence. There's one question here specifically about dependents. So this one is from Nurse Loin. So okay, hold on. Let me just translate it. It's in Tagalog. Just give me a few seconds, guys.
And while she's translating, I would just reiterate to everyone what we were talking about earlier in regards to the qualifications. I know that there's some people out there that say, oh, the Visa Bulletin is not current, so I don't want to move forward. I don't know when it'll happen. And I certainly understand that, not knowing when exactly you might get your green card is anxiety provoking. But I would encourage you that if this is a route you are interested in, at least take those steps forward so that you can qualify. Because all we can do is continue to move forward with these cases while we watch what the Visa Bulletin does.
Yeah, definitely agree to that, Cadence. And yeah, going back to Nurse Loin's question. So he is asking if he can still add his dependents upon the interview. So I guess if I will translate this, so or maybe if I will rephrase the question, up to what stage can they actually add their dependents, Cadence?
Anytime before you receive the green card, you can actually add the dependents, but the process is going to be a little bit different depending upon the stage. If you have had an I-140 filed, but nothing has been submitted to the NVC yet, it is very simple. We just submit an inquiry to the NVC and ask that the dependents be added with proof of their biographic page of their passport and their marriage or birth certificate. If we are already at the stage of the interview, what will often happen is we will ask that that couple or that family to show up with a completed DS-260 for those family members, and the consulate officer can add them directly at the interview. Now, that does mean that likely they may have a little bit of a delay from the time that those additional documents are provided to when they actually receive the green card. So it might be a little longer than the primary, but it still is a possibility.
Okay, Cadence. And what happens to those with dependents? For example, their dependent is 19 years old, for example, when they applied or when they were petitioned, and then because of the retrogression, the dependent became or turned 21 already. Will they still be eligible for the green card?
So that's a very complex and fact-specific
Mm-hmm.
situation. It's going to depend upon how long the I-140 is processing. There is a regulation in the government called the Child Status Protection Act that protects children who are close to aging out. But there's a whole mathematical formula that you have to do to see if someone who is turning 21 can be protected or not. So I would just encourage you, if you have a child who is 19, 20 years old, something of that sort, communicate with your Grandison team, and they can get the specific facts over so that we can review what the options might be. Just know that there are some opportunities out there, but it is very factual specific.
Yeah, thank you, Cadence. I definitely agree to that. You can always reach out to Maricris and the rest of the deployment team to make sure or to answer your queries about your dependents, especially if they are already aging out. And before I proceed to the next question, hi, Sir Irving. Thank you for watching our live today. Yeah, thank you to Niner for joining us on our tonight's Grandison's Espresso Lounge. Next question, I guess, falls onto Cadence as well. They really have a lot of questions about the immigration Cadence. So are they still allowed, or can I still travel to the United States? Meanwhile, my EB3 petition is pending. So this one is from Nurse May Liu. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. So if it's the I-140 petition that's still pending, yes, perfectly fine to travel to the United States. Once the case is sent to the National Visa Center and the DS-260 is completed, which is one of the forms that's completed for the consulate, at that point in time, you should not be entering the United States on a tourist or a business visa. And that's because when you enter the US on a tourist or a business visa, you are asserting that you do not have intent to immigrate to the United States on a permanent basis. When we have a DS-260 completed, there is absolute proof that you intend to immigrate to the United States. So again, perfectly fine at the I-140 stage, but once the case hits the embassy and the consulate, you should not be traveling to the US on any business or tourist visa.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you for that, Cadence. I guess the next question is about embassy interview. It can either be answered by Cadence or by Miss Maricris. So I guess this one is from a nurse who's working in the Middle East. So, is it okay to have an embassy interview in Saudi Arabia, but I will choose Philippines as my departure point going to the United States? I guess this is a very specific question. Yeah. Do you want to answer that, Cadence?
Yeah.
Okay.
So perfectly fine to have the embassy interview at the location that you're living in today. And it's also okay to ultimately come back to the Philippines when you have that immigrant visa and enter the US from the Philippines. What I will tell you that's not permitted is what we call consulate shopping. So when someone might be living, let's say, in the Philippines, but they think the processing time is going to be faster in London, and so they want to have an appointment in London, you have to actually be able to prove that you have ties to whatever consulate you would be attending. So if you're already living in Saudi Arabia, again, perfectly fine because you have those ties. What would not be permissible is someone maybe in the Philippines saying, oh, I want to go to London or Saudi Arabia or wherever else because they might be faster.
Okay. So I guess that answers Nurse May's question. Thank you for that, Cadence. And one question here as well, Cadence. I guess it's been a long time since I last heard this question. So does it still make sense to avail of premium processing during this time?
I am currently telling people that unless they have a prior priority date, it does not make sense to premium process. And the reason for that is even if we receive a fast decision on your I-140 petition through premium processing, your priority date is still not going to be current. And so you still can't reach that stage of going to the NBC, going to the US consulate, all of those things. So in my opinion, it is not worthwhile to spend the money on premium processing because it's not going to help you in any way. Now, if you have a priority date that is close to becoming current or is already current, then yes, premium processing may be a good idea at that point.
Okay. I guess we also have another specific question here, Cadence. So, how long before can we get an interview schedule when our priority date is current? Is there a chance that if they already have an interview scheduled, can it still be canceled in the future due to retrogression?
Unfortunately, yes.
Mhm.
So if an interview is scheduled, and they often will schedule for several months in advance, and let's say the priority dates retrogress, it's possible that you would show up to the consulate and they would do the interview, but they would tell you that they're not going to be able to make a final decision on the case until the priority date becomes current. Now, in regards to the speed, what normally happens is the Visa Bulletin is generally issued around the middle of the month before. So we received the Visa Bulletin for October around September 15th. Normally the consulate will start scheduling interviews at that point for the future month. It's not always immediate. It is a US government system and there is bureaucracy, but they certainly do start scheduling. And then in addition, there's some opportunities for individuals who are in Manila. There's sometimes an option where you can go onto the website and actually try to schedule for yourself. And the Grandison team is very good at that and they can help you with that.
Yeah, thank you for that, Cadence. And I guess one more question here, Cadence, is because there are a lot of nurses who have previously, I guess, applied to the United States, and some have been abandoned by their previous employers. So when can we actually call a nurse, or when is an application considered abandoned, and what is the process for those who have been previously abandoned by their employees? Can they still pursue their application or their American dream?
There's not a hard definition about when something will be considered abandoned, but certainly if the former employer is telling you they're no longer going to pursue the application or they are no longer in contact with you, then I think you can safely say at that point that you've been abandoned. If you have that I-140 receipt or approval notice, what would happen is within the I-140 petition that Grandison would file, we would include that and request that the priority date be ported over to Grandison's case. So yes, you can certainly still pursue your American dream. And as long as you have proof of that priority date, you can even generally retain that priority date in a future filing.
Okay. And I guess, Ms. Joycey, do we have, or does Grandison have a program for abandoned nurses or PTs? Do you accept nurses or PTs who have been previously petitioned by other employers?
Yes, right now, of course, we're welcoming nurses, PTs who have been abandoned by other companies or by other agencies. And as a matter of fact, we also have the Revive Your American Dream program, in which we also reward nurses in particular who are going to be applying here in Grandison. So we just need to have a designated priority date. And then by then, if you're able to submit your application to us, we can set your application running.
Yeah. And I guess, yeah, it's not just the abandoned nurses who's getting excited right now that you mentioned that. I'm also having some inquiries here for nurses who are just about to like start their process, recent NCLEX passers. So I guess maybe Miss Maricris, can I ask you, do you have any tips, or can you share us what are the most common mistakes to avoid when filing for I-140 for those who are for those who are just about to start their process? Maybe we can ask Cadence as well later on. But maybe Mary Chris, from the deployment's point of view, are there any common mistakes that one should avoid?
So on the deployments, and so commonly we experience in terms of the accomplishing the application form and signing the contract. So it is important that they accomplish it properly, meaning to say each question should be answered, and they should also sign, especially the contract. It should be all pages should be signed, and in signing, make sure that they signed it, or the signature that they are using is the same with the signature in their passport, because with their experience, they usually use the pre-filled app in PDF. So it's not acceptable as signature. Okay. And in terms of the documents, it is important to have a complete and readable. So we prepared scan copy for the documents, and also for us, it also affects in terms of their timeline. So if they're adding dependents, they need to take note of who are qualified ones. So if you're married, of course, the qualified dependent is your spouse and children, and you have to provide their documents also. And if you're single, so you don't have any qualified dependents, your parents is not qualified dependents. And initially, so when we review those, their documents, so that's our common information or common errors that we encounter.
Okay, thank you for that, Miss Maricris. That's very informative. So for those who are listening right now, make sure that when you fill out your applications, the spellings are correct, right? The information, the details of your dependents are correct, so that we can avoid what's this? Pabalik-balik. I can't figure out the English for that term. Yeah. And I guess let's also welcome one more special guest for tonight. We also have Abby Lang, Grandison CEO for tonight's Immigration Q&A. Hello, Sir Abby.
Hey, good morning, everybody. Good night. Magandang gabi, magandang umaga. And I think we hit everybody.
Yes, that's right. And sir, let me just comment, your Tagalog is improving. Yeah, no, just kidding, sir. So actually, yeah, thank you for gracing this event tonight with your presence. So we actually have some specific questions for you as well. So given that we have this very very great progression with the EB3 visa category for the October 2024 bulletin, do you still foresee, or do you think there might be other some challenges that healthcare professionals face due to these changes, or what about those whose current priority dates, or whose priority dates are not current?
So obviously the progression is great news. Obviously, whenever there's a progression,
Mm-hmm.
we always wish that the progression was that much more. Um, we do believe, and obviously, Cadence is the immigration expert, but from the data that's out there and from um, working with our lobbyist group, with AAIHR, and from multiple discussions in different fields, there is a lot of data that's showing that it will progress further because the progression that was done, um, most of those nurses, or obviously it's not just a category for nurses, but a lot of those people have already been cleared out prior to the massive retrogression that was done. So there is a lot of talk that it should progress. I did hear Cadence say that it's very unlikely that it will be current, and I 100% from hearing everything that I've heard, it definitely sounds like that would be the case, that even though there's very likely to be an additional progression for it to actually become current, that you would need this bill that we've been discussing and addressing to pass, which can at one point make it current. Will it retrogress even with the bill? I think so. Obviously it's all based on the demand. Now, with all this being said, with the progression that we saw, obviously these are things that it's not just exciting for the Grandison nurses or all nurses. It's very exciting for Grandison, and obviously it's more exciting for our clients that have been waiting years for these nurses to come over. So your question was, how does it affect? It's very simple.
Yeah.
Obviously, I think that there's a lot of nurses that are out there that have heard the terms, and I'm sure all of us have heard the terms of the staffing shortages that have been hitting everywhere across the United States. It's obviously not just the US. I don't think people realize that the staffing shortage of COVID times does not exist today anymore, right? I know that the media likes to make this major crash of the nursing shortage. It's 100% true, even today. But the actual craziness of COVID times is not what we're dealing with today. There's plenty of locations where back in 2020, 2021, we're begging Grandison for nurses where they do not have those needs anymore today. And to answer your question, which is exactly what I'm leading up to, is that what nurses have to realize is that yes, Grandison offers the secure placement program. We have clients that have needs. Those needs may change though. We work with clients that have, some of them have 20 facilities. We have clients that have over 100 facilities. Obviously, that's in different states. We have nurses that when they start off, they're supposed to end up, let's just use an example. Don't take me literally. Let's say they're supposed to start off in downstate New York. But by the time they're able to come over, whether it's retrogression, progression, it makes no difference. It's a long period of time. The need of the client may change by the time you're actually coming over. And I'll use an example, just that nurses should understand that whatever they're going through, the client's going through the same challenges, right? Of waiting for the nurses while they have invested together with Grandison. We had a client recently that a nurse came over that was progressed, and they actually assigned them to a facility in downstate New York. And that's where they were supposed to go. By the time the nurse, between from the flight when the nurse came over, which they were supposed to go to this facility, and they came to orientation, the day of orientation here at the office, the client switched the facility based on the needs change, meaning they filled the facility that they wanted, that they intended to send the nurse to, the need was filled. And they moved them to a different facility, which was not that far away. But the point is, it's a different facility. And that's what nurses have to understand, is that in today's market, when it takes a nurse a long period of time to come over, what Grandison can offer is a secure placement. We are not giving you a secured facility. And a nurse who thinks that when she signs up with Grandison to when they come over, that they're guaranteed the same facility, is not a fit for Grandison. They're a fit maybe for a different company that could offer something like that. As volatile as it may sound, how somebody could guarantee a nurse a slot in a facility for that period of time, I don't understand it. I've seen the challenges that come along the way. But the point is very simple. If you rely on Grandison and you follow our protocols, right? We put everything in there while you're in the Philippines of what you need to do. If you accomplish everything you got to do, our clients will have the needs for you as long as you fit the Grandison mold. Did that answer your question?
Yes, exactly, Sir Avi. And not just my question, but also the questions of other nurses on our chat line.
Oh,
Some of them are asking, what will happen to me now that it's retrogression? Okay,
uh,
so I guess that basically answers it. And the staffing shortage, I guess it will always be there, like what Sir Avi mentioned, right? But what's important is that for the nurses who haven't started their journey yet, their review or everything, start taking the review right now, right? Start the licensure so that you can jumpstart and be in queue, be in line, get your priority date. Okay. And I guess that's my question for Sir Avi. Thank you so much for that. And any other tips or motivational message for those nurses or PTs who are already on the middle of their process and their priority date is not yet current?
is that for me?
Yeah, that's for you, sir. Because some of them are sending hearts right now.
I'm in the presence of Cadence, I have to ask.
Yeah.
Okay,
Yeah.
so,
He doesn't give himself enough credit. He could be an immigration attorney. So he just doesn't want to be an immigration attorney.
Yeah.
So I'll tell you like this. First of all, I did hear, I was in the backstage before listening to the amazing questions and answers that Cadence was supplying, a lot of amazing tips. I will say I did hear that somebody with an earlier priority date, the question was brought up. That is something that Grandison offers. I will just, I know Cadence was saying it would make sense to, to offer premium processing. I could just say that that's something that I have rolled out quite a while ago, that if we have a nurse that does have an earlier priority date, obviously they would have to have a complete, they would need something, a document from the previous employer to basically saying that they're relieved. We cannot jeopardize getting involved with other companies that a nurse would be tied to. That's not something that Grandison would offer. But if you do have an earlier priority date that is progressed, we would premium process it. That's something Grandison would sponsor. So that's regarding people who have a good priority date. Now, your question was people who don't have.
Who don't have, yeah.
I would say like this. Look, there's a lot of points to discuss. Some of it is immigration related. Some of it is more of about understanding life and challenges and how we move forward and what would be the smart thing to do. It's very simple. When we started our nursing project, we were questioned by clients. We were questioned by nurses in the Philippines. How do you know you could do this? And the answer was very simple. Grandison has been involved in bringing over physical therapists and now occupational therapists for many, many years. I think Cadence could attest to the fact that a journey of a therapist, a journey when you're dealing with the process of everything involved in a therapist is so much more complex, but yet in it lies the simplicity of a journey of a nurse, right? And therefore we knew that during the time of COVID, where it was progressed, we knew that it was just a matter of time until retrogression is going to hit. But we said, now that it progressed, let us help our clients that are in desperate need of nurses, and let us help nurses in the Philippines. Let's give them an offer from Grandison. Grandison was a company that was known that people could rely on, that your green card, whether it was a H-1B work visa for therapists, they knew they could rely on Grandison for the entire process in the Philippines to be in the shortest possible timeline, along with making sure that there would always be a placement. In all of our employees that were ever brought over, right? I don't think it's ever happened. I could tell you on my watch, it's never happened that a PT, a nurse, an OT came over and we did not have a placement set up for them. It's happened where the facility had to change due to needs that changed, where somebody came over and they were a little nervous because their facility changed. They thought they were going to a different facility. That's the only thing that's ever happened at Grandison. But if we have a nurse or a PT or an OT, regardless of how long it took them, they could have signed up with us in 2016 and they come over this year, I will have a facility for them. And not just a facility, a secure placement where they could rely on, that they could get themselves housing and they could do whatever needs to be done in order to live there permanently. Now, with that being said, we're going to take it back now to the Philippines. If you're a nurse and you know, regardless of how long it's going to take, or you're a PT and you know that EB2s and EB3s are retrogress, obviously EB2s, you always have sometimes a little bit of an edge, but sometimes even for a PT, it makes sense. You could start an EB3 sometimes earlier, and it may make sense to choose an EB3 path. That's something to always address properly with recruitment, deployment. But with that being said, if your intent is to come over to the US because whatever the reasons are, you're looking to make a better life for yourself, you want to use your education to be able to help yourself and your family back in the Philippines, whatever your intent is, if you don't start the process now, all you're doing is hurting yourself. You want to lock in that priority date so that this way, all these amazing things that companies like Grandison that are pushing for, in order to push bills that will delegate specific categories for the healthcare workers, that will give more slots to all of you, all of this that hopefully, I'm not saying it's going to happen in the next couple of months, right? We know, I'm sure Cadence, we both know that this is going on for years. There is a lot of good information that's coming through. I'm sure some of you saw, we were just on a call with Senator Booker's office, who's very much behind this bill. There's a lot of senators that are pushing for it, and there's a lot of movement that's going on right now. Now, if that actually happens, if you have somebody who's starting off at a later point, that means it's going to take them that much more time to come over to the US, right? There's always going to be some form of retrogression. There's always going to be progression, depending on the times of the year. Best is find the company that works for you. If Grandison is the right fit for you, you need to understand what that Grandison secure placement is to make sure that that is the correct fit for your journey. And if you feel that it is, that's something you want to get started on right away. But the best piece of advice that I could give you is start with whatever it is that you need to do to get that priority date. And at the same time, choose the company wisely. There's a lot of staffing companies. There's a lot of direct hire companies. And there's one Grandison. I am not telling any nurse in the Philippines that Grandison is the answer for you. I am telling you that Grandison is the only one that offers the specific program that we call the Grandison Secure Placement. That is only something that Grandison offers. How do I know? Because that's something that I myself put together. Now, could be somebody else right now is offering that. I don't know. All I can tell you is that it's a unique program. You need to understand it properly. And if it's the right fit for you, get started right away. You're only hurting yourself by procrastinating.
Yes, exactly. And very well said, Sir Avi. Thank you so much. I'm sure that a lot of nurses and PTs have been inspired, right? Jumpstart your journey now. And I guess going back to the questions that we have from our audience, most of it are actually very uh, immigration related, process related, Sir Avi. So I'll be going back to Cadence and Maricris as well, right? For Alfie, I guess the question is actually state specific. So we'll be asking one of our deployment specialists to reach out to you, Alfie, about your question as well. And then let's have here this. I guess the next question is for Miss Maricris. Miss Maricris. Can you provide us a timeline when we can do vaccination? So this one is from Nurse Patrick.
So, sorry. So for the vaccination, so once they reach the DQ stage, so they can start the processing of vaccines.
Okay, thank you for that, Miss Maricris. And I guess the next question, let's give the question to Cadence. So this is specific to their English exams. So what happens if their PTE or IELTS have already expired? So this one is from Alfie as well, and we also same question from Nurse Juliet. Yeah.
So I think your deployment specialist can talk a little bit about what Grandison does specifically if there's an expired exam. But what I will tell you is that in order to be able to qualify for the I-140 stage, you have to be able to demonstrate that you have that licensure in the state that's specified. And so that would be one of the kind of beginning criterias that Grandison would look at, is whether you meet the base qualifications for the role. And if you don't have that licensure, then it may be there may be a delay while that is worked upon. But I don't know if Joycey or Maricris, they might be able to specifically talk about what Grandison does when there's an expired exam.
Okay, thank you for that, Cadence. Let's hear it from maybe Miss Maricris or Miss Joycey for this specific question about the expired English exam.
Well, yeah. So right now, of course, definitely, whenever there's an expired English exam, we would really advise our nurses or our PTs to make sure that it's valid. So as much as possible, we have to retake the exam. And yeah, so this is also in line with what we mentioned earlier. Always make sure that everything that you're going to be submitting, everything that has to be complied to the requirements and all, it has to be valid. It has to be up to date as well.
Okay, thank you for that, Miss Joycey. And for our next question, let me just backread for a while, guys. We have been jumped up by a lot of questions here. So, do I need to bring my kids age 8 and 5, my dependents, during interview?
I can take that one. Generally,
Okay.
the consulate does not require young children to attend the actual interview. You are going to need to bring evidence of who they are and their relationship to you. So, passport biographic page, their entire passport just to have the stamp put in it. And then, marriage certificate, birth certificate, all of those evidence of relationships. But yes, young children do not have to actually attend the interview. That's not something that the consulate requires. They will still have to do a medical exam, though. So that is one of the steps that they will still need to do.
Okay, thank you for that, Cadence. And I hope that answers your question. Nurse Danica, I think, is that earlier. And we also have one question here about the dependence, Cadence. So what happens? Will there be any effect if their dependents follow 3 months after the nurse, for example?
So there's two ways that this can occur. One way is that the entire family receives their immigrant visa stamps, and then the primary beneficiary enters the U.S. first to begin working, and then the family members follow. That is perfectly fine. You will just need to ensure that those family members enter the U.S. before their immigrant visa stamp expires. So as long as you do that, that is not problematic in any way. There are also situations where a primary beneficiary, so the primary employee, will want to sponsor the family members after he or she has entered the US. That is still possible. It's a little bit more of a lengthy process. So we would encourage that if you have family members that are interested in coming to the US, and that only includes spouse and children under 21, that if at all possible, they attend the immigrant visa interview with you and then plan to enter the US before the immigrant visa stamp expires.
Okay, thank you for that, Cadence. And I hope that answers your question, Nurse Jules. And we also have one question here from one of our PTs, Cadence. So from Danica, do approved EB3 visas still depend on visa bulletin dates for the interview? Visa currently at NVC.
So I want to make sure I'm understanding the question correctly, but yes, certainly, even with the PTs, if a PT is in the EB3 category, their priority date still has to be current for them to actually receive the interview at the US consulate. So whatever your category is, whether it's EB2 or EB3, your date has to be current in the Department of State's Visa Bulletin to be able to receive that interview. If that wasn't the question, let me know. But hopefully that helped.
Okay, let's wait for Danica. I hope that answers Danica's question, but let us know, Danica, if you have additional questions or follow-up inquiries about that. And yeah, we have here one more question from a PT actually. So, is there any other way that we can get to the United States in a faster timeline, or another other visa options that Grandison offers? Maybe I'll have Miss Joycey answer this one.
Yes, right. So one of the additional perk that we have if you're a Grandison scholar is the H-1B route. So typically this is an annual lottery that we have. So the process would involve submitting a copy of your unexpired and valid passport. And then of course, definitely a valid travel document for your beneficiary or your dependent. So in terms of the calendar or the timeline, it normally takes place in March, and then the lottery picks for selection process would be in April. And we've seen, for instance, how some of our PTs, our OTs, are able to speed up the timeline of their application, specifically for OTs. We've seen how, let's say, some of the OTs we deployed They signed the contract with us in March of 2022. And then because of the H-1B, they were deployed around 2023, sometime in November, I believe. So there. So it's an option that we have for OTs and PTs specifically. So if let's say that you're not selected in the lottery, of course, we still encourage our OTs and PTs to continue their application because we still have another option for that for them.
Okay, thank you for that, Miss Joycey. And I guess it's a follow-up question on what Miss Joycey mentioned. This one is from PT Carlo. Hi, PT Carlo. Thank you for watching. So, can I still apply for an H-1B visa while I have an ongoing EB3 visa application?
I can
This is
answer
not about
that.
EB3. This is about H-1B. Yeah, here, go ahead, Cadence.
Yes, totally fine to move forward with the green card process while you are still also moving forward with an H-1B. There's no issue with that. They can run concurrently to each other.
Yeah. And I guess let me just add to that. So a few weeks from now we will also be having our H1B immigration Q&A, right? So we will be inviting Cadence again to answer your questions about the H1B, the difference of H1B and the EB3 visa. And I guess for now we will be summarizing our event from with that questions, but if you do have more questions, feel free to message us on our Facebook page or maybe reach out to your Grandison deployment specialist or coordinator, right? And of course, before we end this session, this has been a very interesting and very lively session. We've had a lot of questions from our audience, right? 130 viewers earlier from Facebook. Um, and I guess before we end this session, I would like to get last message from our guest for tonight. Starting maybe from Miss Joyce. Any
So for
message?
now,
Yeah.
yes. So in terms of our discussion, so it's been a very active discussion. So we would like to thank everyone who watched or joined us tonight. And definitely, again, I will reiterate the importance of preparation. And for those who are really interested to push through with Grandison, anyone who would want to apply with us, then you have to reach out to the recruitment team because we will jumpstart your application right away. And if there would be some tips that I would impart, it's to really listen to your recruiters, listen to your deployment coordinators because they would know best and they'll be able to guide you every step of the way.
Yes, definitely. Thank you for that, Miss Joyce. And of course, let's hear it from Miss Maricris. Miss Maricris, any tips or message to the nurses and PTs and OTs who are watching right now?
Yes, so on the deployments end, so it is important that they work on their requirements, especially because it can fast track their application. So also it is important to follow their handler in terms of the process. So and also keep in touch in terms of the updates. So basically, the deployment team will always be here to assist them in terms of the processing of their application.
Yes, agree. And of course, to those who sent in their messages earlier from Facebook and direct message, Miss Maricris and the rest of the deployment team will also try to get in touch with you to answer some of your questions that we're not able to touch today. And of course, let's also hear it from Cadence.
I have 2 points. One is that I know that the Visa Bulletin can cause some anxiety for people, but my expectation is that we will continue to see forward movement. It may not always be consistent. There may be some times where things go backwards a little bit and then things move forward again. But again, I expect to see forward movement throughout the future, which leads to my second point, which is that you should control the things that you can control. We can't control what the Visa Bulletin is going to do. That is set out by the Department of State. What we can control is, providing the correct documentation to Grandison, making sure that you meet the credentials that you're supposed to have for the role, things like that. So I would try to avoid being too worried about what the Visa Bulletin does, but rather focus on those things that you can take action on and actually control.
Yes. Thank you for that, Cadence. And of course, before I move on to Sir Avi, thank you, Cadence, for answering all of the immigration Q&As from
Of
our
course.
nurses and PTs earlier. And hopefully, we'll also have you for another immigration Q&A about the H-1B visa
Yep.
as well.
Looking
And
forward to
of
it.
course, let's also hear it from Sir Avi.
So first of all, I just want to thank everybody. Obviously, we'll start with Jody, for pulling
Yeah,
all this together.
of course.
But um, obviously, Cadence, we really appreciate any time you're able to take time out of your busy schedule to help our nurses, therapists that are in the Philippines, just to really give them a sense of security. And that's really the relationship that Grandison has together with Cadence, is that ultimately we know that any petition, any process that we work on for any of our employees in the Philippines, it's in the best hands. There are challenges that come up that people on this call, maybe Cadence probably does know, but I can tell you that most of you probably don't know of the craziness that's going on in the United States, of people who are here that are completely messed up. I have clients that are reaching out to me constantly that have people in their facilities who are literally here illegally without realizing it. And when the facility does realize it, they're fired. Facilities in the United States cannot have people that are working here without a social security card, right? I know this is not one of the topics that was discussed here, right? But I want people to realize that when you do things the right way, ultimately you're going to gain, right? You cannot get a job in a healthcare facility in the United States without getting a proper green card or a H-1B work visa or some other form with the student visas, different things that Grandison doesn't get involved in for very good reasons. There are a lot of times we get questions that whether they come to my desk or other people at Grandison, or sometimes it ends up by Cadence. Could we have somebody come over on a specific type of visa and then we'll work on getting them a green card? And the problem is that most of those cases are not 100% legit. There's a lot of cases where you could try in a certain way to say, well, you could do things in a certain way. The reason why we work with Cadence and her staff is because they make sure that everything that Grandison does regarding petitions in any form, work visas, petitions, whatever Grandison can offer our people, are going to be done in the most squeaky clean way. That's what Grandison does. That's what we've always done. And that's what we're going to continue to do. So there may be times where you hear about certain things. There's a lot of stuff that go around the internet. People, I was literally just questioned last week by a client who has 4 nurses working at a facility in a specific state. I'm not going to go into much detail, but it basically comes out that there was an agency that brought them in on a H-1B work visa for a nurse. I'm talking about they came over this year. Now, I'm sure that everybody on this call at this point recognizes that a regular registered nurse, which was the case for these people, are not eligible for a work visa. There are unique cases, which Cadence, I'm sure we'll get into on your H-1B call. I don't know if it was addressed earlier. But my point that I wanted to address is to recognize that just because you see something or you hear something doesn't mean it's legit. You need to get clarity from people who actually have a proven record. You need to make sure that the pathway that you're choosing is a legit, correct, and guaranteed path. That guaranteed path has a lot of meaning. It means for immigration, and it means, are you ultimately being guaranteed a slot that regardless of how long it's going to take to come over, you're going to get a facility to work with for the term of your contract. Regardless whether you're a PT, OT, or a nurse, it makes no difference. Everything we're discussing now fits all the categories. So you want to make sure that the company is doing your immigration in the fastest way, but ultimately in the number one way that you will not have any issues, because challenges come up constantly, even when you're doing it legit. You want to know that you're backed by the best to make sure that it's going to be handled properly, and whatever department that we need to reach out to, they will be reached out to. And ultimately, that slot that you've been waiting for, even though, yes, it's true on the client end, like we discussed, of course, it makes a difference how long it's going to be. But regardless, Grandison's going to have a slot for you. And I do want to make one last point, and we can end off with this. I do know that it's a constant question that comes up. I know it recently came to me, so I'll address it here because I'm sure I don't know if it's a question that anybody asked on your platform, but it comes up all the time, right? It comes up from therapists, it comes up from nurses regarding states, right? I don't know if this was addressed, but I think it's just important to make this as the last point, is that today, Grandison does not have a program like we used to have when we started the nursing program specifically, where you get to choose your state. And it's obviously based on the fact that we need to make sure that we take care of our clients' needs in order to have the slots that we guarantee all of our employees. But if you're slated for a specific state, unless there is something crazy that goes on and Grandison reaches out to you, if you're in queue to go to a specific state, for example, you're a nurse that signed up while we had request your state, right? That you could choose your state. We're not going to switch your state without you knowing. But is it possible that your state will be switched? I'm going to say it once. 100% it can change. Is it likely to change? No, it's not likely to change, but it can change. And you have to know what the Grandison program is and what it means when we say Grandison Secure Placement Program, of how secure it is. It's 100% secure, but it doesn't say Grandison Secure Facility or Grandison Secure State. And there's a reason for that, because we're not securing that. We're securing you a placement. And understand whatever company you sign up, make sure you understand the program correctly, read the contract, understand everything involved in regards to what's being offered to you. And with that, I'll end to say thank you, Maricris. Thank you, Joycey. You guys are doing a phenomenal job in your departments. Our recruitment, our deployment, everything has really been running smoothly. I'm sure all the nurses and therapists have amazing things to say. So thank you, everybody.
Thank you so much, Sir Avi. And of course, thank you once again, Cadence, Maricris, and Joycey for joining our immigration Q&A for tonight. And of course, thank you to all of our viewers, the nurses, PTs, and OTs who stand by and watch our Grandison's Presso Lounge for today. So watch out once again for the next Grandison's Presso Lounge featuring Cadence about H-1B visa. So that's it for today. Thank you and have a good night. And have a good day to Cadence and Avilang in the United
Thank
States.
you. Thank you.
Thank
Take care,
you.
everyone.
Yes.